Are you a fan of bone-chilling tales and spine-tingling suspense? Do you long for the days when horror zines ruled the night, delivering terror and thrills with every page? Then you need to check out Bookworm's Horror Zine. Bookworm's Horror Zine is your ticket to a time when horror was raw, gritty, and downright terrifying. This throwback to the classic horror zines of the 70s and 80s is packed with original horror fiction that will keep you up all night. But that's not all. Inside each issue, you'll find chilling articles, devilish games, mind-bending puzzles, and so much more. Each page is a journey into the unknown, crafted by writers and artists who live and breathe horror. Whether you're a longtime horror fan or just discovering the genre, Bookworm's Horror Zine is your ultimate companion for all things creepy and crawly. And guess what? Bookworm's Horror Zine is proud to sponsor the Right Brain Cafe podcast. So, while you're feeding your creative spirit with this podcast, why not feed your darker side with Bookworm's Horror Zine? Visit bookwormshorror.etsy.com and get your worms today. Unleash your inner horror fanatic with Bookworm's Horror Zine, if you dare.
All right, this week on the Right Brain Cafe, Regina and I are going to talk about dealing with failure in your creativity. Before we get into it, if you like this podcast, follow us on whatever podcast you're listening to. That'll help us grow the show. And if you think that it will help someone you know, share it with them. We're on Instagram at Bookworms Horror Zine. And then to support us, there's several ways, actually. Like, you can buy the new Bookworms, which is issue 5, which is all about rock and roll horror.
Mm-hmm.
And it's our biggest issue. It's an awesome issue, so pick it up. And if you want to get the past issues, there's some that are still left. You can do that. You can also buy things like Regina's book, Carney, that came out. And all these links will be in the show notes. And also, if we bring up a book, check in the show notes, because that book's probably also in the show notes. I know I try to capture everything we talk about, and a lot of times books come up, or even like videos. I think when you brought up your Zatarain's video, I put that in the show notes. So like
I saw that.
Or Gemini Rising, which I'm sure is going to come up in this episode. Yeah. Because I want to talk about some of that. So a lot of these links will be in the show notes. So make sure, that would be great if you're interested in supporting us. There's lots of things in the show notes to get that done. Anything you want to add, Regina?
No, I think you covered it really well.
Are you working on anything currently?
I am working on my new book called Final Dress. I think I mentioned it before. It's a slasher adult horror story set in a theater, like a community theater. And I'm currently trying to get it I'm doing it on Wattpad, the first draft, because I'm trying to enter it into the Waddies competition.
Mm-hmm.
And the deadline is in August, so I've got a lot of work to do. But
so it's a novel?
It's a novel, yeah.
So that's the contest what do they have, 80,000 words? Is that what it is?
No, 50. I think it's 50,000.
All right.
Is the cutoff. But I won a Waddy a few years ago with Code Red.
Mm-hmm.
So I've already won the award, but I thought it would provide for me incentive to meet the deadline. And then if it doesn't win, I'll take it down, re-edit, and release it, the second draft. So it's a little rough. I'm about at 26,000 words. So I'm at the halfway point as far as meeting the deadline. But I also wanted to mention yesterday when I finished my writing, I mentioned before I have a Excel document where I record my word count for the last several years, and I passed 500,000 words yesterday.
Wow. Do I have an applause sounds? Let me see. I don't even know. Oh, that's the wrong thing.
Oh, that sounded pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well, you can plug that in later.
There you go. Can you hear that?
No.
I don't know why you can't. I got to figure that out. But anyway, I just gave you some applause.
Yes. So I passed the 500,000 word mark, and it actually is probably more than that because sometimes I forgot to record. But I think I started this list probably during COVID. So it's been a lot of writing. But looking at that and then thinking about this topic today about failure, uh, did all of those words give me money? No, but definitely feel a sense of accomplishment for having written that much, and I'll keep going. And I can't wait to hit 1 million.
It's interesting you brought that up. Like, did the words bring money? Because one of the things, and this might have been what triggered me, but the one thing that I heard in yesterday was pursue excellence, not success. Getting those words down is a way of pursuing excellence. And chasing success, one, you have no control over that, but you do have control in getting better in your craft, whatever that is.
Definitely. And, I look at my writing career and think, well, I haven't been able to make a living at this yet. I do make some money. It supports my hobby, if you want to call it that. But as far as success, I've won many awards. I don't know if that means anything, but it certainly is nice to get that kind of acknowledgement. And it's given me more confidence. I'm like, well, I won a Webby, I won a Waddy, I won these different awards. Something must be working. So I'll just keep plugging away. I don't know. Talking about failure, I guess it depends on how you define success. I guess we could break it down into those parts. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think let's define failure. First of all, there's very clear failure where you're in a competition. Could be any kind of competition, and there's a winner and there's somebody who doesn't win. If you don't win the prize, you may think that's a failure. So that's like a very clear competition where there's a prize to win, and you either win or you lose, and somebody might think that is failure. Then there's the failure, like I feel like a failure.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Where it's like not something that you can point to where I lost this, but it's just you aren't
like
where
I'm a born
you,
loser and I can't.
or you haven't achieved what you had hoped you would achieve by this point. And actually what I wanted to start with was, Regina, if you could talk to your younger self about failure, what would you tell your younger self?
I would tell my younger self that, well, like going way back, like I remember, like if you failed like a test or something, like in my household, getting back to my childhood trauma, it was like you would be labeled a failure, like if you didn't meet a certain perfection, oh, you're just a loser kind of thing. And so that would be, I would tell my younger self, don't listen to that crap. And that trying and failing is part of life and it's part of growth. And I think anyone who you would consider a big success would agree with that this idea that just because you don't meet a certain level all the time, you shouldn't be labeled as like you said, thinking of yourself as a failure. So, it's mostly like just trying to find your own path. Like I was always going to be a failure at certain subjects in school, like math. I just couldn't do it. And then the weird thing is that later when I lived in New York and I was getting my teacher's license, I had to pass a math part of this state test and I was terrified. So I remember I bought myself like an algebra book and I went back and learned the basics. And not only did I score high enough to get the license, but I actually scored highest in that category. And that taught me something really valuable. I was like, wow, I did have the aptitude to do this. I just felt like I couldn't do it. I believed I couldn't do it because I would be told, you're a loser in math or you're a failure in math. And I'm just giving a personal example. So I would definitely go back to my younger self and say, don't listen. This is how we learn and you can do it. Yeah, maybe I'm not going to be a rocket scientist, but I can learn basic algebra.
What I would point out in your story is it wasn't that you couldn't do math. It was that there was no reason in your mind or any desire to do it. So like people
That's
gravitate towards subjects that are interesting to them. And they put time in getting better at things that are interesting to them. Things that don't interest them, they don't bother to get that. If you really felt like math was fun, you could. There's no reason Regina couldn't be a rocket scientist. It's just that was not inside of you as like something you wanted. So you didn't want to put the time into getting better at it.
No, I had no interest in it, and it showed.
Yeah.
But the things I did, I was interested in. I excelled, like
Yes.
art and writing and creative writing. I was always good at that, and drawing. Like all of those things that, and doing. And then later, when I got involved in theater in high school, I became like this. The president of the drama club. I really excelled because I was motivated, but I had to overcome. And in a lot of ways, I'm still working on that inner voice that I heard, way too early in my life about, well, you can't do that. That's those like harpies, I like to call them. They're inside a lot of us, some more than others. And you really have to fight against that. But I think that failure, it depends on how you define success. I mean, compared to someone like Stephen King, I'm not doing so well, but I feel pretty good about what I've accomplished. Yes, would like to make money at this, but that, I haven't gotten there yet.
You want to make a specific amount of money because you are making money with your
Right.
books, right?
I would like to make enough to pay some bills,
Yeah. So
that kind of thing.
yeah, and Stephen King, you brought him up, but he was rejected so many times. I remember this story where he has this big nail on his wall, and every time he would get a rejection slip, he would put it on this nail, and the nail got to the point where he couldn't put any more rejection slips on the nail, that he had to get a bigger nail for his rejections.
Is that in his book on writing? Because that sounds familiar to me, that
Yes.
story.
Yeah, that story's in his book on writing. And everybody uses Stephen King as the example of success, and he is successful. But had he had a different view on what failure was, then we wouldn't know who he was. Like if he said, I'm a failure. And
Well, he threw the first manuscript of Carrie in the trash, right?
Yep, and his wife
retrieved it. So that's the story that made him famous.
Yeah, I guess if I was talking to my younger self, I would basically say failure is a step. And I don't even like the word failure. You know what I mean? So
No, I don't either.
you brought up mindset, and this is the book I was looking for earlier. It's called Mindset: The New Psychology of Success: How We Can Learn to Fulfill Our Potential. And it's by Carol Dweck, Dweck. And it really does come to like your mindset. And she talks about a growth mindset where you know that what you're creating is not going to be your best work right away out of the gate. And you just keep working on growing in that art. And as I said earlier, focusing on excellence or just the best you can do. And don't worry about likes and follows and all that stuff, and just working on being the best you can be in your craft, knowing that as you do it, you're going to get better at your craft.
Definitely. And that is its own reward, as cliche as that might sound, and its own success. But if we're talking in terms of creativity and like putting, like, let's say you write a poem and it's a bad poem, like, and you write it and for your creative writing class, let's say, and all the feedback you get is this is bad and you feel terrible about it. Well, either you can stop, just say to yourself, I guess I'm just not a good poet. I'm not going to do that again because I suck. Or you can like maybe give it a little time and break it down and think, okay, let me make a list of the criticisms I heard. Do any of these ring true to me? Or is that person just being a jerk? Or they just don't like it for their own reasons. And then you think, where can I improve this? Yeah, and that's how you learn from failure.
What is the goal of this poet? Is it to write a poem and it be the best poem? And if that's the case, are you done after that? Like, if you feel like I wrote a poem and everybody says it's great, where do you go from there? That's the same thing
Yeah.
where people come out and they get this big #1 bestseller or a hit song, and now it's like the next thing has to be as great or better.
Yeah.
You know, and so I think the growth mindset is like, I'm going to put this out here. You know, there's a great line in Ed Wood by Tim Burton, and Ed Wood's played by Johnny Depp is on
Yeah,
the
that's a fun movie.
Yeah, and he's on the phone, and he's talking to like one of the major film people, I guess, who, you know, a studio, and he's like, "Oh, really? The worst thing you've ever seen? Well, the next one will be better." And
Yeah.
it's just it's just great, that attitude. It is encouraging to know that where you are can get better, and that where you are is it's okay that you have room to grow. You don't want to be in a place where you're so good that you can't go anywhere from that.
Yeah, I think if you do your best that you can at that moment, even if you don't hit the mark, you shouldn't feel guilty because if you tried, you know, you did your best. Now, that voice that's like, well, that's not good enough, that can be destructive. It can motivate people, but I think that you have to cut yourself some slack. And also, it's, again, how do you define success? Because if you're defining it by whether other people like it or not, I don't think that's the best metric. I think it's, do you feel like it was successful? Did you write the book you wanted to write? And then you can step away and say, okay, I feel good about this. And if people like it, great. If not, I'm all right. I'm
And-
moving on.
Yeah, and so we recently submitted short stories that got rejected, and I know that I said,
Don't remind me, James, of my failure.
I felt that, one, I enjoyed the process, which is the most important thing. Like, you know, if it was miserable making it and then you get rejected, then it's like, why are you doing it? But I had fun coming up with the story and putting it on paper. And I, at the end, said, this is good. This is the best I could have done. I submitted it and it got rejected. But that's okay, because I feel successful that, one, I hit the deadline, and two, I had fun with it, and three, it was the best I could have produced in that time in my life.
And it was very good because I really enjoyed it. And what are you going to do with that story? Are you going to put a collection together at some point?
Maybe, but I think right now I put it up on my blog. So it's, you know,
Okay.
jamesippoliti.substack.com, I think. It's in the show notes.
Yes,
It'll say
definitely
my
read that
news.
story.
Yeah, my newsletter. It's on there.
And my rejected story is also on my blog.
Yeah, and I'm happy with it. But you know what's funny? When we're not talking about creativity, but relationships. I remember I was probably 21, and I was dating this girl, Sue, and it didn't work out. And I remember my friend Anthony saying to me, do you feel like you gave it like everything you could to make that relationship work? And I said, I do. I feel like I did everything I could. And he's like, well, then it's okay. Like, there's nothing else you could have done. And that was the first time I was in a relationship that it didn't work out, and I was okay with it. And, you know, I didn't feel like a failure. I felt like, you know, we met, we had a good time, and it didn't go anywhere from there, and that's okay.
Yeah.
You know, and I think,
that's a good friend who can say that to you too.
yep. And I think,
You know, keep those people in your life.
yeah. He also is the one who said, some people say everything happens for a reason. That reason doesn't necessarily revolve around you, though.
Ah, that's good. That's
Yeah.
good. Very wise.
Yes. Anthony was very wise. He's actually the one that my song on Spotify that gets a lot of plays is called I Hate My Neighbors. And,
okay.
and he wrote the lyrics, and I wrote the music. And it's
I'll
funny
have to listen to it.
yeah, and it's like the one song that I wrote that seems to get a lot of plays says a lot about our society, that people really don't like their neighbors. And it's
I love
everywhere.
my neighbors.
It's all, yeah. I don't really know my neighbors, so. But
I have
anyway,
great neighbors. But if you do feel like you're a failure inside and you need outside approbation in order you to feel like a success, then I would say, as I'm putting my therapist hat on, that failure experience in life is trying to show you that you need to change your core belief about yourself, because you're never going to be satisfied by outside approbation, because you're it's a losing battle, because you're never going to get it to satisfy that inner voice. So you need to really dig down and figure out why you feel that way. It probably has a lot to do with, childhood trauma, and change it, and make a list like, well, these, actually I have been very successful at these things, and you write them down, and they can be very non-tangibles, like just, it doesn't always have to be money or a house or a car. And, I don't care about that stuff, but a lot of people do. And, there's these benchmarks. If you're not here at this type of, at this stage of your life, you're a failure. And for an artist, you got to get rid of that at a really early age and just say, I'm not living like that. I'm not living under those rules, and you can free yourself of that burden. But it doesn't really, it can't come from the outside so much. I really believe it has to come from the inside, and you have to make your own peace with that. If what I just said made sense,
I think it
hopefully it did.
I would say that what we need to also say is, if you suffer from depression and anxiety and things like that, then I think you should see a therapist. And however you can do that, you can do this on your phone now. I know that without therapy and medication, for me, basically, I don't know, like, I needed that when I was younger, and I never had that. And at least I needed someone to talk to.
Right.
In therapy, like, not just like your mom or something, I don't know if I could have gotten to this place today where I can be clear about what I think about failure, and while creating, and not being depressed about feeling like a failure, without therapy. And I think if this is something that you struggle with, and you don't believe in therapy, or you don't want therapy, like, think about it, because there are brain things going on that you might not have control over. It's a chemical thing that you can't, manage, and you need either medication or someone to talk to manage these things before you can even get to the base of where you should be to deal with this stuff.
Yeah. And I think you can heal a lot of, I agree that having someone to talk to is invaluable. But I also think that you can heal yourself through the work that you're doing by being really honest in your expression. And that could be the only place where you can really get out your true feelings. And that's very important. But if on top of that, you've got to be a success, whatever that means, you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself. Where I remember reading this, and I don't know where, but it was some kind of, it might've been Robert McKee, actually. He's not the most the biggest cheerleader in the world, but he's brutally honest. But it was something like, if you wrote a screenplay, doesn't matter how good, how bad, or whatever, if you've written full screenplay, pat yourself on the damn back, because you've done something that most people will never do. They might talk about doing it. Same with making a movie or writing a novel or a short story, anything, or a poem. You've done it. Like, you should feel like a success just for completing that task, and then move on from there.
Yeah. You know what's interesting about that? Especially a movie. Years ago, and I would always go, if I knew someone who made a film, I would go support that, go see it, whatever it was. And so there's a couple that come to mind. One was called Lebanon, PA, and you can actually get this on
I've heard of that
Amazon. But he's a local guy. He made this film, and they did their premiere in Lebanon, PA. So I went with, I think, my friend Chris. We went up and we saw it. And then the other one's called The Murder Game, which is also like a horror film that you can get on. Lebanon's not a horror film, but Murder Game is. And the one thing I said after every one of these screenings is, wow, like, they did it. Like,
right.
The other thing is, back then, it was like, okay, this is out. You got to get them to buy your DVD. But now everything's really available. So you can go watch. I can tell you now, go find The Murder Game and watch it. Or go watch Lebanon, PA. And you can do that. Go watch Gemini
Yeah.
Rising. You can do that. You don't have to wait for a DVD or find the website. You know, like we
no,
can,
and
we can easily.
I have hundreds of DVDs.
Well, we should put them
left
up
over.
if people want to buy them.
Yeah,
Put them up on
yeah.
on Etsy.
Yeah, I should definitely.
All right, we'll talk about that.
Okay.
But that's the thing. Like, you're right. Pat yourself on the back if you've done any of these creative things. You finished something. Most people just talk about it, and that's the end of it.
Right. It takes a lot of determination and discipline to finish any kind of creative project, and that in itself is a huge success. So whether it lands with an audience or gets, fills up your coffers, that's another thing.
Yeah,
But someone could say, "Hey, your book failed because people didn't, it's not a bestseller."
Well, there's so many examples in history of, there's photographers who they find their negatives after they've passed away, who were never even thought of as a success, but now they are a huge impact in the craft, the field that they were doing. Like, they didn't know they were going to be so influential because they were a failure and then died. And nobody wants that. Nobody wants to become famous after they're dead. But
we don't want to romanticize that.
No.
You really have to think about what your expectations are. And I know it's hard to do that, but and that's also part of the learning process. Like, I remember when I first put my first short story, submitted it. It didn't make it, but the editor of the anthology sent me a very nice rejection, but saying it was so close, but you needed, it was too rough on this part, you needed more editing. And I remember feeling like devastated by that, because I put so much expectation, because I needed that editor. And I think about this too when I'm as an editor now with Bookworms. I put so much pressure, not they never knew this, but I put so much pressure on that editor to give me that approval when I really didn't need that. It was just, I needed to work a little harder on my short stories. And I of course did, but I had to go through that. You know what I mean? Like, I think that we need to look at failure. I like Derek Murphy's YouTube videos on writing. I don't know if he's still posting. I haven't watched in a while, but he put out this idea of fail quicker.
Yeah.
Like when you're trying to do like Amazon ebooks, fail quicker. In other words, you don't want to be sloppy and put a sloppy product out. But a lot of my early books, I really should have hired editors to proofread, and I did it myself. And there are a lot of mistakes in them. And it was like, yeah, I learned it's worth it to spend the money to get them properly edited. And even then, there are going to be mistakes and blah, blah, blah. But I had to have those failures in order to be like, yeah, I need to do that.
Yeah.
So
there's a quote, I'm going to paraphrase it, but the story is that Thomas Edison took 1,000 tries to get the light bulb to work. And a journalist said, how did it feel to fail that many times? And he says, I didn't fail that many times. The light bulb was a process that took 1,000 steps.
Exactly.
And that's how I think we should turn our thought to be with creativity. It's like the novel is a process that takes 10 novels. A film is going to take a lot of films to make the film that may get. And again, this doesn't mean if you do the work, success is going to come, but you will have a better chance if you don't let failure bother you and just see it as a step in where you're headed.
Right. And the arts are really difficult because you just have to accept the fact if you're going to work in the arts, you're going to fail. You're going to get rejected time and time again. It's just part of the process. I know you as a musician, how many times did you play at like crappy bars?
Oh my God. Yeah.
And you barely escaped with your life, and had to fight the owners to get paid and all this stuff. Like, looking back, they can be funny stories, but when you're in that, it's not very comfortable. And you're like, why am I doing this? And, like, it's like when you watch the documentary, my husband Joe and I watch documentaries about or biopics about famous musicians. And Joe's like, why are they always so miserable? Aren't they having any fun when they're touring and making all this money? And it's always like this crap. And it's like, where's the story about, yeah, I really enjoyed it. I don't know. Is that's just part of the process? Maybe some people do enjoy the ride a little more, but
it's funny you bring that up because I was watching, there was a very short video of David Lee Roth right after, I guess, Van Halen broke up. And he was like, yeah, I like to the touring. I loved all that. He loved the whole process of being a rock star. And the rest of the band were getting married and they were like kind of like having different, they just like tired of it. And he didn't get tired of it. And I don't, who knows what all the reasons were, but that was one of the reasons he was stating that he loved that world and the others didn't.
Yeah. Like I also remember David Lee Roth, like back in the 80s, he would be like waking the band up at the hotel and be like, let's go out jogging. And they'd be all hungover, Yeah. I think having being really positive about what you're doing is you don't want to be like that Pollyanna person that annoys everyone, but like if you have that positive energy and you're having a good time, that's amazing. I try not to get down about this stuff anymore because I've already been through it. Like when in doing, I guess with Gemini Rising, you mentioned before, I always said that whole web series was a meditation on failure because they were the band that didn't make it.
Yeah. And I wanted to bring that up because if anybody watches Gemini Rising, you'll look.
It's on the ticks are up to the ticks. The clips are on TikTok now.
Oh, they are.
Yeah.
But it's not it's just clips, not the whole episode.
No, not the whole. I just picked out some funny bits and put it on TikTok.
When you watch the first episode and then you go to, which is the talk show one? 5? Is that 5?
Yeah, that's like near the end. Yeah, 5, I think.
When they play the song live?
Right.
Like
it's been tremendous growth from the first one to that episode. Yeah.
When you see it's just unbelievable to see the growth from episode 1 to just maybe a few episodes later and where this has grown to be like, wow. And Regina, like that series is a huge success in my eyes because at the time when I discovered it on, I guess, I don't know how, like it was on the internet, maybe, I don't know, but
that's right. We met through this.
Yes.
That series, I think.
But I was doing the podcast, This Is Some Scene, and I was interviewing. Now, a lot of the This Is Some Scene episodes that are available, if you want to listen to them, are more celebrities. But I had a lot of episodes where I was interviewing independent filmmakers. And I watched a lot of really bad independent films. And to see what you were doing compared to everyone else, like you were worlds ahead of everyone else.
Oh, thank you.
Because of everything you pursued excellence in that. Like it was the costuming, it was the acting, because the casting, just having how do you do it? Like that was like unbelievable because most people.
I had a very talented group of people I was working with too. I have to give them credit where credit's due.
But
it was very collaborative. But but the casting, I think that I feel good about that. Just watch. I haven't looked at it in a long time, and like putting the clips up, I was like, oh my god, that worked really well.
Yeah, and I'm saying, like, if you don't know Gemini Rising, does that mean it's a failure? No. Means you're a failure because you didn't find it, and you should.
Right. You got to be cool, but with the cool kids.
Yeah, you're not with the cool kids if you don't know it.
But I don't know if there's a lot of factors involved in this, but I do have I had a second season completely written that we never filmed, but I now have an idea. I wrote a new song for it a couple of years ago, and I have an idea for a new video that finds Gemini Rising now in the 80s.
Ooh, you're in my neighborhood now.
Yeah, and what they're doing and how the band is broken up and Robert works for like a plumbing company and he has all these kids and and kind of going, because going back to what, checking in on him and his brother and his other bandmates, because what happens to the bands that don't make it,
Yeah.
that I find that really interesting. There's a band that I loved in the 80s called the Catholic Girls. Do you remember them?
No.
They were kind of like a punk rock all girl band, kind of before the Go-Go's, or maybe around the time of the Go-Go's. I knew about them before I knew about the Go-Go's, but I remember seeing them play in New York, and I have their record. And the lead singer, Gail Peterson, wrote a vampire novel that I haven't read. I reviewed it on my channel. So I think they're still touring, but to me, they were the band that were, in my opinion, just much cooler than the Go-Go's, but they never made it. And I mean, they did make it in that they made a couple records that they have enough of a fan base, and they're all like my age now. So they're older gals. They have much of a fan base that they can do small tours, but I wouldn't say they're failures because they're awesome, so not everybody's going to make it. Like, I think we look at the people who are at the top and think if we don't get there, we're failures. And I think that's a crock.
Yeah. And you brought it up also, like, about expectations. Why don't you, if you're listening, get a piece of paper and a pencil, or if you write on an iPad or something, write down what you believe success should be, and then write down like steps to that goal that would be little successes. Like if your goal is to write a novel, right? That's success, to finish a novel. Then have each week or even each day to have a goal of writing 200 words. And so if you hit that 200 words, that's success. And if you just do it in baby steps, then you will reach the bigger goal. But I think we get overwhelmed when we think about, I want to create, for example, if I want to create a rock and roll musical, that's a huge, and I want to put it on stage. Like, that's so overwhelming to me.
I think we should do it, James. You're getting me inspired just mentioning it.
I have an idea.
I have one in me. I have an idea too.
And I would love to do that. But the point is, success would be, okay, well, the first thing you're going to need is a story. So like maybe coming up, like my goal would be a short, what's the, not writing a whole story for it, but what's the theme, or what's the little blurb that I would be able to elevator
write
pitch.
one song.
Right. Well, that would be the next step. Yeah. Like that's the next step is what's one song, and doing all these baby steps to get to your ultimate goal. And that way you're getting a taste of success instead of feeling like, because if your goal is to do that thing every day that comes up, that you don't have that rock and roll musical on stage is a failure. Right.
Right.
But if you like,
but if you do it, if you start, that is a success. You've started.
Yeah. But you have to have tiny goals to get to the big goal, because otherwise you'll get overwhelmed and you'll continually question yourself because you don't have that final thing.
Yeah, it's the questioning yourself. It's the belief. And this I got from therapy, like the deep beliefs about yourself that are negative that you need to really look at, because most of the time it's not your own voice. It's the voice of like a disapproving parent or something telling you, like a harpy voice saying, "Oh, you can't do that." And you know what? You can if you work on it. But if you want to define yourself, if it's your identity, and I think that's also a big part of where people get confused about success and failure. If it's your identity to be a rock star, and you don't make it, and you feel like a failure because now, you find yourself at, 35 years old and you haven't made it yet, and you feel like, oh, I guess I better become a plumber after all. Well, dude, you can still keep your hair long and play on the weekends and at night. Like, you don't have to give up on that dream.
And if any plumbers are listening,
they make a lot more money than
we need you.
But yeah, so it is about, it's a belief that you can define your own success, but make it realistic in the way that, here's another one that a bad harpy message I think a lot of creators get, especially when they're young. It's like, well, before you get to do what you really want to do, like before you write the rock musical, you should start doing some commercial things and writing jingles. Well, okay, you could and make money that way. Well, you could some that might work for some people, but you got to work toward the goal that you really want to do, if you know what I mean. Like, do you ever see that wonderful documentary about R. Crumb? It's called Crumb.
I don't know.
The comic.
I know who he is.
Artist.
I'm not sure if I saw the documentary.
Oh, it's so good. It's. I mean, it came out like 20 years ago. It's really, really good. And, he's a great artist and just kind of followed his own vision. But he was saying like his dad was always and his brothers they were really troubled people, but they all were excellent artists. And his dad was like, you got to, go around and paint a picture of someone's house and then try to sell them the picture,
Yeah.
He's like, so you got to be careful that you don't listen to people who don't know what the heck they're talking about, because what is motivating you is intrinsic to you. And you need to be true to it and respect it and give it life, and don't let the outside voices, don't depend on them to give you the approbation, but also don't allow them to tell you suck all the time or you don't know what you're doing, because that's the artist's path. And it's very much part of going through that fire. I mean, I've heard so much of that message from even like what I would say well-meaning friends, but they don't understand where I'm coming from. And I've learned to not listen. And it's very freeing. But when I was younger, I would listen and be like, oh, I guess they're right. I don't, and that would just waste so much time.
Yeah.
And it's like, my attitude is like, am I asking you to pay my bills? No. Well, then it's none of your business how I make a living or not, or what I do with my time. Back off.
Yeah. I mean, if your definition of success is money and you want to write music, there are ways to do that versus the art side of writing music. So like you brought up jingles, and I don't know if that's a thing anymore, but there are so what some people do is, especially with electronic music, you can create what they call loops, or you can, or royalty-free music. And there's tons of websites out there. I actually did create a song. Didn't know to see how this works. So I created not a jingle, but I created a little theme song that I thought it would be cool for a true crime podcast. And then I uploaded it to one of these websites, and someone bought it. And
I buy that stuff all the time.
Right?
Music.
Yeah. And same thing with book covers. So there is better ways to make money with art, if that's your goal, than to do it as a rock star or a fine artist who's going to be a MoMA.
But my point is, you don't have to do those things.
No, I know, but I'm saying,
but you can, and there's nothing wrong with it.
What I'm saying though is, as the individual, if your goal is to be in MoMA, then don't be chasing I'm going to just do logos, right? If your goal is to be in MoMA, then go for that. But if your goal is to make money, then you might want to be a logo designer.
Yeah, like I think a combination of both. Like I make money doing stuff that has nothing to do with writing. And I kind of like the separation of that, because it keeps the one side pure and the other side is just something I'm good at, doing costuming and selling vintage clothes on Etsy is pretty much how I'm like keeping, not that I make a lot of money, but it's my part-time job, I guess you could say. And it has nothing to do with writing. And in fact, on my job, only a couple people I work with even know that I am a writer.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of keep it separated. And for me, that works better. Like, I'm not trying to write copy for the program at the theater, which you might have done years ago. I know you worked at the same theater.
I did. I actually got, I think...
And press releases. Not that I'm saying there's anything wrong with that, but I'm not trying to do that. We all have to have our survival jobs and as artists, and there's, that's good. It's good to have something you can do that, but it's not, I don't like the idea of, well, fall back on that. That's a dangerous concept too. Like if I don't make it by the time, by the time I'm 25, I'm going to fall back on this. And that, if that works for you, then I would say, great. Like you don't have that artist drive, and that's fine. But if you do have the artist drive and you deny yourself that, you're in for a whole world of mental anguish.
Yeah,
I remember you and I've had this discussion many times about wishing we didn't sometimes want to do this stuff.
Yeah, when you brought up plumber, I used to always say, like, I wish I just had the desire to be the trash man, because then I could say that's an achievable goal. I would make pretty good money. And I go home and I don't have to think about work, But when you're an artist, that's not an option.
No, but you could be an artist and be the trash man.
I am the artist, and I figure every job I had was the trash man,
Yeah.
It's maybe not trash, but it was equally as mind-numbing as any other job I would, every job I have. So it's like and I think that's one of the reasons is why I am where I am, is because what's more important to me is creating than just getting up and becoming a Wall Street guy or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like an American Beauty when Kevin Spacey's like, I goes into the fast food restaurant for the job.
Yep.
He's like, I want the least
amount of responsibility. Yep.
Amount of responsibility. And there's something really freeing about that. And it's like, and you kind of like, well, what about my pride? And that's just, you're confusing that with identity.
Yeah.
If my identity, if my ego can't handle me being the trash man, then I might have a problem. But if I'm a trash man and I get off and I, take a shower and get down to work on my art, then I'm a winner.
Yeah.
I've got a job. I'm supporting myself and I'm free. And no one's calling me like the trash. Hopefully the trash people whose trash you take out aren't calling me at 9 a.m. or 9 p.m. like wanting to have some kind of like conference call or Zoom meeting with me about the job. I'd let it go.
And it's funny, all those people who like that's their lives are constantly trying to, outside of that, find some creative outlet, because that job makes them just so miserable that they're like, I wish I could be doing sewing or something, but they don't have time. And so they look for these things, like these programs that they can go, like you talked about, painting and drinking wine. That's the only thing they can do, because that's the only thing they have time for, But
maybe that satisfies them. Because
well, I'm saying if that's fine. I like drinking wine and I like painting. I think they're two great things that go together. I actually wanted to do, it was ridiculous, but I was thinking of doing what was it? Summoning demons and drinking wine.
I think I've done that before.
But yeah, you just have it like a thing in the same concept, like you put it out there. And it's like, come on over. We're going to summon a demon tonight and we'll have wine.
We'll have wine, right? That's good. I like that. That's a good idea. But yeah, so I mean, I don't know if we really have even defined failure, but except that it's an inevitability as an artist that you're going to fail, however you define it, but you're also going to have some success if you keep working at it.
Yeah, if you don't let failure take over, then you will succeed at some level. There will be success, and as we've defined success is, if you start something and finish it, to me that's a success. Then it's also like the show must go on philosophy is really important. Like you got to finish it. Yeah.
I remember when I was directing a production at the girls' Catholic school a few years ago of The Tempest, and it was all girls, and they were awesome. And the lead girl who was playing Prospero, she was Prospera, developed laryngitis, and she was like in a panic, and the show was going to go on, and it's like, what do we do? What do we do? And I'm like, okay, well, you're well enough to stand on the stage and go through the block. And it's like, well, I'll be in the back with a microphone doing your lines.
Yeah, that's right. From Singing in the Rain.
Yeah, but she recovered enough to do the show. But I'm like, I'm not I'm not canceling the show. No way. Like the show's got to go on.
That's
and
true.
I was like, I was okay with it. I'm like, oh yeah, this is an ideal, but hey, it's a high school show. People will handle it, be all right with it. But I think that scared her into like actually recovering, and she was fine. But yeah, like it's not a failure if you do something with heart. It's not a failure if you do something and you do it to the best of your ability. And it's like, well, I did that. Because let me tell you something. You know this about anything. Once you get a certain level of success, that might feel good for like 5 minutes. And then you're going to go back to feeling the way you always do.
Yeah,
You know,
I
like
often.
it's great to win an award, but let me tell you, it really doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. And I often wonder if I made it as a rock star back when I was in a band, I think I would be dead at probably at 27. Like, I think that I wouldn't have made it.
Wow.
I honestly did not have the capacity to handle that. And I think I would have been very much into alcohol and drugs and would have probably just, offed myself. I honestly believe that, because that would have happened to me where I would have had that and I still would have been depressed and miserable. And then I would have been like, well, now what? What else is there? Because I've achieved what I wanted to achieve and it's not making me happy.
Well, maybe that's why some of those people don't make it past the age of 27.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure it is.
Because that's a real crisis age. I remember it well.
It's funny talking about the show must go on. And you probably could ask David about this, but there was a time at the theater where whoever the actor was not there. And the show must go on. And Susan comes up and says, would you stand on the stage and just read the lines?
To you?
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
And everybody's like, they laugh about it to this day because it's like I was the box office guy.
Right. And you weren't even like the understudy.
And I'm not an actor or anything. And she wanted me just to stand there and read the lines when they came up. And I said yes. And
awesome.
Last minute, the guy shows up. But
wow,
I was like terrified because I'm like, this is not, if we want to explain to the audience that this is a professional theater, these are equity actors. This is not like,
people are paying.
Paying and filling, and it's a whole audience. And I was like, oh my God, what did I just agree to? I was so happy when that guy walked through the door. I'm like, oh my God. But that's the show must go on. Susan was like that. She's going to make it happen.
Well, I remember when I was working at the theater a couple of years ago, and I was a dresser at the time, and which is like helping people change costumes backstage.
Yeah, in the green room.
And it was a new play or new musical that was premiere with Broadway actors called The Rivals. It was really great. I don't think the show. It was kind of like its out of town tryout. I don't think it ever took off, but it was excellent. We had amazing performers in it, and as a dresser, I had to dress one of the actresses behind like a dressing screen on the stage. So it was actually like I was hidden behind the screen, but I was on the stage.
Yeah.
And then I had to like, after I did her change, I had to like back up and do this kind of like, still like, it's almost like the some of the furniture was kind of alive. So I had to do this thing. And the actor, I didn't quite, they threw me in to be honest. Like I had no rehearsal. They said, oh, you just stand there and like on this cue, you back up. Well, I kind of missed the cue and the actor kind of bumped into it. So we made it into a bit. Like I just thought really fast. And it actually like the screen got applause.
Wow.
And I was so thrilled for my little part. And I felt like, hey, I showed heart. I went out there. I did my best, and it could have been a failure, but I covered. And the actor who had been he was on Broadway as the in Les Miserables. Like this guy was like a huge Broadway person, actor. We just had that moment, and afterwards, I said, "Oh, thanks," and he's like, "Oh, no problem." Like he was a pro.
Yeah.
And when you see pros at work. And I remember one time the same actor was in the green room talking to one of the crew, and he missed his entrance, and the actress he missed the entrance and she covered like a pro because she is a pro. And later they were like, he was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." She's like, "Oh, whatever, keeps it interesting."
Yeah.
So you have to be able to roll with the punches, I guess, is getting back to what we're talking about. I hate it when I hear someone say, and I've heard this before from creators, oh, I guess I'm just not good enough. I'm going to give up. And that drives me crazy.
Yeah. Well, I think we covered a lot on failure and dealing with failure and how you can change your mindset about what failure is.
And don't let anyone call you a failure because they're probably just jealous.
You call us up, we'll punch them.
Right.
So,
just
all right.
Metaphorically.
Well, if they're in the area. Anyway.
No violence on this show.
I know, I'm joking. All right. So we'll be back in a week with a new episode. Make sure to check out all the links in the show notes. And that's all I got.
And get some small progress this week.
Yeah. Create a small goal to show that you can succeed and achieve that goal.
Yep. And then you're a big winner.
All right. So long.
All right. Till next
Bye-bye.
time.
Yep.
Bye.